Welcome everyone to the Promise of Deep Tech High Impact Mentoring by SGInnovate and StartCentral. I am Ziying from SGInnovate, and if you're new to us, we are a government-owned organization in Singapore with the mission to build deep tech innovations from Singapore for the world. We invest in and help build deep tech startups in the fields of AI, medtech, and quantum tech, just to name a few. We work with entrepreneurial scientists and clinicians to help bring their innovative research from lab to market, and we also develop tech talent and engage with a vibrant deep tech ecosystem. Today, we are excited to hear from our panel of deep tech mentors, Prof. Cha, Bernadette, and Xiaoning, moderated by Eugene, as they explore the tenets of effective mentoring to help both startups and mentors make the most out of their relationship. Just some house rules. During the webinar, if you have any questions during the event, please do not hesitate to post them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And do feel free to use the chat box to connect with our wider community. Now, let me hand over the time to Susan from StartCentral to share more about StartCentral. Susan, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Susan. I'm from StartCentral. So for those who are not familiar with us, StartCentral is an open innovation platform by A-Star. Our focus is to incubate and accelerate the growth of deep tech startups, and we also hope to bolster the startup ecosystem with the help of partners like SGInnovate. So if you are running a deep tech startup or planning to start up, feel free to connect with us. Without further ado, I will pass the time to our moderator today, Mr. Eugene Wee, who is leading A-Star's Venture Creation and Growth Division. The team actively seeks to expand the base of innovative enterprises by leveraging technologies and capabilities in A-Star to create innovative products, services, and competitive businesses in Singapore. Eugene, please.
Thank you very much, Susan. Hi, and welcome to this session on the promise of deep tech. Today, we're talking about high-impact mentoring. And who better to share with us on high-impact mentoring than three of the most illustrious women in deep tech here in Singapore. Let me start by first introducing our speakers this morning. First of all, we have Professor Virginia Cha, who's the Adjunct Professor for Technology Entrepreneurship at INSEAD. Now, Professor Cha is a leading educator of innovation and entrepreneurship here in Singapore, and she is an active researcher, an angel investor, and most importantly, she's also a mentor. Now, Virginia founded many, and I do mean quite a few, companies that have exited with their listings in NASDAQ and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Virginia Cha. Virtual claps down below. Next up, we have Ms. Huang Xiaoning. Now, Xiaoning is the chief angel, and I really do like that title, Xiaoning, at Angel Central. Now, together with the partners, Xiaoning provides angel training and investment support to bridge good angels with great startups. Now, over the past few years, Xiaoning has been advising startups on a very regular basis to support entrepreneurship, especially for women executives and founders. Now, as we all know, we are also celebrating women in deep tech today. So consider me the token thorn among the roses here. And I'd like to introduce the last rose for this morning. Her name is Bernadette Cho. Bernadette is the General Manager of Entrepreneur First here in Singapore. Now, Bernadette oversees the EF office and cohort, and what they do is really help the most ambitious and talented people build deep tech startups. Now, she's also an angel investor at Angels of Impact and is passionate about impact investing as well as driving investments and startup in the impact space. So without further ado, ladies, can we jump into the questions? Now, again, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, feel free to key in your questions or vote for questions that are appearing in the Q&A. I'll get to them as soon as I get over some of my questions, which I want to ask first. And maybe I'll spend a few minutes on this, and as soon as some of those questions are coming in, I'll make sure that the speakers, our esteemed speakers, will be able to answer them. Now, this morning's session is centered on mentorship. And what does mentorship mean? Well, it's about helping startups, right? And in order to help startups, maybe what I thought was to frame how we can help startups in terms of what are the challenges we think startups are facing. And maybe we'll take it from different lenses. So Professor Cha, you're a serial entrepreneur. Can you share with us some of the challenges that you face leading up to your exits and with the building up of the various companies that you've started?
Oh, there's so many stories to tell. I don't want to take up that much time, but the biggest challenge for a startup entrepreneur is really the fact that you have to make so many decisions, and it's all on you because you're the founder, you're the CEO, everybody's looking towards you. And there are like hundreds of major decisions that you're making in the span of a few days, all under a lot of uncertainty, ambiguity. And guess what? You have to get most of it right. and there's a lot of pressure for that because, you know, unlike, for example, if you were a stock investor and you're making decisions under uncertainty, although that's really more risk than uncertain, but that's just your own money. So yeah, there's a little bit of stress, but it's a different category of stress as a startup founder, CEO. You've got employees and staff who left their jobs to go on this journey with you, and you're really responsible for them and their future. So the biggest challenge is this lack of confidence that you're doing the right thing, and yet you have to soldier on because the buck stops here, and that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much, Professor Cha. Well, I've got some money in airline stock, which I bought before COVID-19, and I assure you there is quite a bit of personal stress as well, but certainly not as much perhaps as the stress that you've described. Maybe switching directions a little bit to Ms. Cho. So Bernadette, as a convener of talent with Entrepreneur First, what do you think are some of the greatest challenges faced by both I would say scientific entrepreneurs who are coming onto the scene for the first time?
Thanks, Eugene. So we are a deep tech talent investor, which means fundamentally we are working with people who may have not had commercial experience before. So one of the big challenges, I think, is reframing the way they approach a problem and reframing what is, I guess, acceptable in a 0 to 1 phase versus what they've previously done from a research phase. And that might mean two things. One is you're no longer pursuing this for intellectual excellence or curiosity. You're pursuing this to serve a customer. And I think that paradigm shift can be a little bit jarring. And customers might pay for something that might not be what you intellectually want to pursue, but it's what's going to be best for your business. And I think that trade-off is something that people grapple with very early on as part of our program, but I'm sure as part of any startup journey as well.
Thank you very much, Bernadette. And for Xiaoning, as an investor, and particularly as an angel investor, now you invest in early stage startups, right? And you encounter many first-time entrepreneurs. And as an investor, what do you think the challenges are when going in and making those initial investments in, especially with first-time entrepreneurs?
I think with the first-time entrepreneurs, the challenge is, on one hand, you need to look past the confidence level. So how real is the confidence? Now, on the other hand, when you see the inconfidence or the insecurity in them, how do you get past it to discover the gem? So it's actually summarizing from both Virginia and Bernadette. Actually, it's we got to stand behind them and try to find a gem in the founders. So that is the, I guess, relative to what you say about the airline stocks, right? Sometimes it's a bit of that kind of feeling too, but we are trying to find the gem. And then it's from the conversations and trying to have the confidence in them when they are not so confident in themselves. And sometimes if they're too confident, then we are not so comfortable. How to balance that?
Thank you. So let's respond to some of these challenges that you've talked about. So Prof. Cha, you talked about the decision-making process, and then we talked, Bernadette, about the individuals And in particular, we zoomed in a little bit on confidence issues, right? Both over and under confidence issues. How do you think mentorship will be able to help address some of these concerns? So we talk about high impact mentoring here today. How, as mentors, can we make an impact? Or what do we expect from mentors when it comes to making an impact in some of these areas, some of these challenges? With decision-making, Prof. Cha, how do you think mentors can help with your decision-making process?
Okay. So in deep tech, it's even more challenging than, I guess, normal tech entrepreneurship, because in just, by and large in entrepreneurship, you have the market uncertainty where not you have a particular product that will meet market needs. For deep tech, it's another greater level of uncertainty. And I don't want to scare off any deep tech aspiring entrepreneurs here, but the other level of uncertainty, has to do with whether or not you are betting on the right technology platform, right? I mean, there are so many competing technology platforms out there, and there's always just such a small window where the particular technology platform you've chosen can actually take a lift off. So in terms of mentoring that, it's on two levels. And I find that it's interesting. Mentoring deep tech entrepreneurs is slightly different than mentoring, I guess, let's say digital media entrepreneurs. Because in digital media entrepreneurs, you tend to find a younger entrepreneurs. And so it's less about mentoring them about marketing tactics, because they know all about social media and all that. It's more about helping them make sense of prioritizing what they need to do next. And whereas mentoring deep tech entrepreneurs require a far more, I guess, a much more structured approach. It's a lot of conversations to bring out what I call the latent fears. And deep tech entrepreneurs tend to be PhD postdocs, and not to generalize, but they tend to keep a lot of emotional expression, if you will, underneath. That it is not something that, unlike digital younger entrepreneur, they're quite open about sharing their confusion or their insecurities. Whereas when you're mentoring deep tech entrepreneur, and I'm gonna ask Bernadette to chime in here, I think sometimes it's almost like having a conversation with somebody who thinks they're making a talk at the research conference, talking about how great the technology advancement has been. And so it's a whole different conversation. And you can't push, neither case can you push entrepreneurs, because it's all about them making sense on their own. And it takes a very explicit effort on a mentor's part to not put in our own biases and our own preferences of what we believe, because we also have our own beliefs. And it's more about helping them see things and asking questions in such a way that opens up their mind into a different way of thinking. That's how I would contrast the challenges or the opportunities of mentoring the two different styles of entrepreneurs. And maybe Bernadette can chime in here.
Yes, please, Bernadette.
Sure, happy to. I think you're so spot on around not conflating your biases with what the process will be for someone else, Virginia. One thing that we have at EF that I think is a huge asset to us is we have a bench of venture partners, and then Xiaoning is one of them. And our venture partners are a wealth of experience and wisdom for our founders, because some of them are a mix of angel investors, a mix of exited entrepreneurs. And I think the recognition and the humility that everyone's startup journey is different, but that there are, I guess, grounding elements that everyone needs, whether that's a safe sounding board to come to and say, actually, things are falling apart. How would you think about this? Or for people who haven't been in the commercial world before, how do you think about go-to-market from 0 to 1, which is really different from 1 to 10, or even scaling further beyond that? And also to actually also stress test and kick the tires on a tech readiness level. Is there actually a customer that wants to buy this? Or is this something that you're just interested in pursuing because it's intellectually challenging? And so I think mentors play many different roles across that spectrum. And it's really important not to only take the lens of would I want to invest in this business, because I think that that can be quite a limiting belief for some mentors as well.
Thanks, Bernadette. So I'm going to be a little bit provocative here, a little bit naughty. Xiaoning, one of the questions or one of the statements that Prof. Cha and both Bernadette mentioned was this idea about not introducing your personal biases into mentorship. I wonder how one does that when you're both a mentor and an investor, because certainly as an investor, you bring in a whole different set of biases, and that's the returns on the investments that you need to make, right? And so how do you balance that? Or can you in fact balance that and differentiate between the two?
That's really a very good question, because I think before I invest, I see myself as, so to be very, just put it out there, I am never an official mentor to any startups, because the full mentorship actually requires a lot of effort on both sides. So my style is, while I work with the EF companies on a regular basis, it's actually, there's a time frame around it. So for the mentors or companies under my portfolio, my 35 companies, it's really on a long-term engagement as and when need basis. I don't sit down with companies like, every month we must do an update in that kind of setup. So that's the framework I work with. So pre-investment, the thinking in my mind is that it's very much, do I see the potential in the founder and the business? But post-investment, I try myself to not let the numbers affect my judgment. I try more as an effort basis and whether they're making the right decisions. But I draw the line if I see certain founders with value systems or sometimes it's integrity level, that I would draw the line. So my judgment will come at the ethics base, but my judgment will not come from whether the business is doing well or not doing well. Of course, whether I want to talk about pro rata subsequent investments, then that comes in, right? But I think when I'm interacting with the companies for non-investment related decision, just pure support level, it's really looking at them as this person who is trying to run a business and doing the best that they can. Yeah.
So I'd like to chime in here on this issue. So I've invested in 16 companies, angel investments. And what I tell myself is that every time I write a check, I imagine that money gone. And so anybody who's trying to be an angel investor, you have to have that mentality. Otherwise, you have a lot of explaining to do to yourself life partner. No, to your life partner. I don't know about this myself. I don't, you already wrote it off. Okay. So anyway, so what I do is I ask myself, am I capable of walking away from this money? And then, because in your mind, you've walked away from that money, you can engage with the entrepreneur purely as a mentor. Now, having said that, I can tell you it's easier to have that mentality on a small check versus a big check, obviously. And I've written checks, that ranges between 30,000 to over $250,000, okay, for a single company. So I can tell you the big check ones are really, really hard. But the small check one, okay, fine, all right. So it's really hard. And I want to chime in on one other point here that's very interesting. So in case anybody gets so super excited, you found an angel investor who writes checks with money gone, with wings on them. I just want to tell everybody I have stopped angel investing. I can publicly tell everybody that. But what I've done is I'm putting my money into 2 venture funds. So I'm a limited partner now, or general partner. Sorry, not general partner. That's running the fund. I don't want to run funds. I'm a venture partner or limited partner to 2 venture funds now. And I'll tell you the reason why. It doesn't so much have to do with wanting to score. Guys, if you want to score money, go and buy cryptocurrency. And now, by the way, this is a joke. This is not investment advice, okay? All right. So investing VC fund is not necessarily a quick return either. But I'll tell you the reason why I'm doing that, why I stopped investing in as an angel investor. But I'm still a mentor. And just because I made up my mind a long time ago that I wanted to be a mentor, it's much more rewarding to me intrinsically. Because I found that in some of my startups, I always start off being a mentor, then I become an angel investor, okay? But I found, not all, but many of the startup entrepreneurs, I didn't change my mind, but they did. Meaning they stopped seeing me as a mentor and they start seeing me as an investor, as a shareholder, as a director. And so all of a sudden the information they're telling me is sugar-coated. They're no longer telling me their inner thoughts. And that's not why I wanted to engage with them in the first place. If I wanted to make money from investment, trust me, it's not a startup. And I hate to say this, okay? So when the entrepreneurs start talking to me as though I'm a shareholder, they start only giving me sugar-coated information, financial information that's they file with ACRA versus what's really going on. That's when I say, wait a minute, how do I reset this relationship? And after some 2 years of noticing it and thinking about it, I made a decision to stop angel investing and instead put my funds into VCs so that it can still participate in the ecosystem. And I'm 100% just engaged with entrepreneurs as a mentor, as an educator. That's just my view.
Thank you very much. Now, I see quite a few questions popping up in the Q&A box. Just a reminder to those that may also be trying to put questions into the chat box. Appreciate it if you can divert those questions into the Q&A box so that everyone can have sight of that. Unfortunately, I've only got so much real estate on my screen and I can only get to those on the Q&A box, yeah? And before we get to some of those questions, just as we are talking about women in deep tech, and that's something that we're celebrating today, I just wanted to hear your thoughts as women entrepreneurs, as women investors. Do you see if, based on what your experiences are, have they been any different? Have they been any more difficult? Has the journey been any more arduous for you as women? Maybe we'll start with Bernadette.
Sure, Eugene. It's a good but also a tough question. I think, I can only speak from my experience. I would say that what I've occasionally found difficult is what I think research backs up, which is two things. One is people struggle with imposter syndrome. They struggle with second guessing themselves or thinking about, are these questions that my male counterparts would be asked? If my male counterparts approach this problem in the same way, would they be given the feedback I was given, or would they be getting the questions or the response that I'm receiving now? So I think that's one. I think the second one, and maybe I can speak on some of our portfolio founders' behalf, is the obvious question of, if you become a mother, will this startup continue to be your priority? How will you be able to build this venture as well as be a new mother at the same time? How do you think through that cycle? And some have delayed fundraising because of this, some have delayed R&D because of this, because they don't want to have to answer those questions. It might not be a fair setting to answer those questions, but they continue to arise. So I do think there are some, I would say, structural challenges in the second example, and then I think some lived experience from the first one.
Thanks, Bernadette. Xiaoning, would you like to add to that as a parent?
Yeah, so I think from my own experience, I would say, frankly, I don't think I experienced any difficulties as a woman founder. I ran my company for 10 plus years. I wouldn't say that I was discriminated as a woman founder, but I do note that earlier days, it was actually a lot harder getting myself heard being a young founder when you're trying to interact with customers. So I would say ageism was a bigger issue for me rather than gender-based issues. That being said, I do, so I actually, like Virginia, I do both VC investment and angel investing. And I was just having this conversation with one of the VC we invested in. And he openly asked me, how do you deal with a pair of founders who are actually emotionally committed to each other? like they were dating each other and then they were getting married. So it's actually a concern that is actually not targeted purely at the woman. It's actually at the relationship, at a co-founder level. How are they going to deal with it? So I see it as, it's purely from my lens. It's really on the personal level. Can these two persons be matured enough to treat both business relationship and their life partnership in a professional way? And as an investor, of course, we got to consider all aspects of things, right? But then it's a person's life decision. To me, that is still more important for the investment outcome because it's their life. I cannot weigh my investment returns to be more important than their life decisions. So that's why I don't want to run a fund too, because I don't want to be responsible for other people's money, because I know my views may not echo that of many other people. So, I mean, that's my stand. And I think that everybody is, I mean, they have the right to make their life decisions. And I think even as an investor, we are just maybe 2% of their professional life. We shouldn't be pushing forward our views on that. That said, I was told this a lot to say that, you know, I have a family, I have kids, and I run a business, and it seems like I seem to have it all. But I mean, I just want to remind people that you are looking at my life in a condensed version and in this dimension. You are not seeing my life in the journey that I went through. So don't see the summary and think that that was the journey and that was a good story, because you got to go through it, and then in that process, you need to make a lot of hard decisions. Like what Virginia said, a lot of hard decisions. You must be willing to take responsibility and must be able to make it, because inaction or indecision, it's actually a decision of your own for not trying to make the hard calls in life. And I think that's not a good way to lead your life. So that said, I think as an investor, I try to support as much as I can. But I think the key is to respect. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Xiaoning. So Prof. Cha, as an educator, now you've certainly had exposure to entrepreneurs, I suppose, over a longitudinal basis. You've seen them. You've seen the statistics for the numbers, either for gender or for age. What do you think are the differences in some of these areas?
Gosh, Eugene, I'm probably the wrong person to ask this question, because I don't see you. I don't know if you know my background. I have a computer science undergrad. I went into computer science degree when I was 16 years old. So I'm like one of those geeky people. So I never saw people as men or women, boys and girls. I see ones and zeros. I seriously don't see any difference. I have never made decision around whether or not a founder is a man or a woman. And I can honestly tell you this. And I seriously do not see if many people, when I was an entrepreneur, I didn't notice anyway, any difference that people saw me as a man or a woman. I mean, oh, sorry, not as a man, obviously, as a woman. So yeah, I can't answer this question. I'm the wrong person. Ask one of the other two wonderful ladies.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, the sense that I'm getting for you three wonderful ladies is that there is, or there may be, some structural issues, but nothing that women in deep tech who are looking to create new ventures will not be able to overcome. So kudos to all three of you.
Okay, I cannot agree to that though. However, unfortunately, I have to say that you gotta call a duck a duck. There are practices in the ecosystem that is not ideal for women. So what I was saying is my approach. And I think I try my best to be fair, but I cannot guarantee that the other people see the same way. But for people who see things in this way, I think it's important that we speak up and we try to move our soft influence. From the founder's point of view, you got to do your own due diligence, reverse due diligence to make the choices you need to make. You shouldn't go to a VC or a mentor simply because they promise you something, but whether they can execute that is a different story, right? So you got to make your own judgment call. And end of the day, if you decide to be a founder, you are in the driver's seat. Whatever decision is yours to own. It's never the mentors to own. It's never the investors to own. So you need to make the call. If one day somebody make you a proposition, it's not a proposition that you appreciate, but you went ahead with the proposition because of certain outcome that is being promised, the call is yours. You got to live with that.
Okay, so the jury is out on whether or not misogyny exists within the ecosystem. But So for all our lady founders out there, if you certainly need some advice in this area, I think Xiaoning has inadvertently put a hand up to help in that regard. Okay, now shifting gears a little bit, we've got a whole bunch of questions that are coming in. I'd like to address some of them here. We've got Jenny who's asking a question on emerging tech. Now, so we talk about deep tech and how it takes a certain amount of time to come to fruition. How do you mentor startups, I suppose is the question. How do you mentor startups where there may be a long gestation period for the technologies? Is it any different from, well, I think digital technologies certainly was highlighted as something earlier as being an alternative because those may see much quicker returns. So if there's a long gestation period for technology, the technology needs to be incubated. How do you approach mentorship for those deep tech startups? Bernadette, you mentioned earlier that you guys deal primarily with deep tech. Do you want to take a stab at this question first?
Sure. I think there's varying levels of tech readiness that come into our cohort and also that exit our programs. So, to use the example that I think Jenny cited, which was quantum, we have a few quantum startups at EF as part of our portfolio. And I think a couple of things that have been helpful in navigating what is a still very nascent space. One is actually just coming back to fundamentals. Who is your customer? Who is going to be the first use case and who is going to buy this? And decoupling it from being something that's purely science or academic led. So I think that's the first thing, which is really identifying a business case and a problem to solve in your startup, regardless of how nascent the technology is. That's the first one. And then I think the second one is really surrounding yourself with people who have similar experiences. And that doesn't necessarily have to only be limited to the Singaporean ecosystem. So what we've seen startups do that have typically nascent technologies is they've gone further afield. They've traveled when we could, and now virtually for conferences in Europe and the US, and they've pushed, I guess, into new, partnerships or customer development or partnership development from further afield. And they've also sought out specific individuals who might only be academic in their nature to help them along with R&D. But these might be mentor relationships, these might be contract relationships, rather than necessarily rehoming them full-time into a startup. So I guess those are maybe the three prongs that I've seen successfully tackled through EF portfolio.
Thanks, Bernadette. So I'm going to tie this into, I think, question number 4. We talk about pivoting. I think that was the questions. And with deep tech, you basically have, I guess, 2 different ways of looking at it. I think you've got researchers that are coming out of the laboratory with technologies that are looking to bring to market. But what you've talked about really is understanding who the customers are, understanding where the market is. Now, that might bring a different lens to where the investments have been in terms of technology development. So I think there is a need to pivot to a certain extent, right? For many of these technology founders, how do you think they best can do that?
I think it's actually not unique to deep tech founders. I think that people expect a fair number of pivots, even from the journey from seed to Series A, just to use external funding as a benchmark. And so I wouldn't say that's something that is peculiar to deep tech founders only. What we see is that as people continue their customer development, they might find new, more lucrative segments than the first one they landed on, or they might realize that the first use case that they were serving is actually a smaller market, and that if they pivoted the solution slightly, they could actually address and capture a much larger market. I think that's true of both software and hardware-based solutions, but I'd love to hear from Virginia and Xiaoning's portfolio experiences as well.
Well, perfect. You guys have heard Bernadette. But okay, maybe we'll start with Xiaoning. Can you share a little bit based on your experience?
I want to chime in on this part. Actually, for me, as a mentor, when I work with the startups, I see myself as an external voice to support them. And I'm not here to give answers. But one thing about deep tech startups, like you pointed out, I think a big chunk of them, 90% of them, come up from the research background. And so during the research background, let's be very factual about this. You have a research grant. You're being paid a salary. So in a sense, you're well taken care of, But when you decide to be a founder, to be in a deep tech space, the one thing that a very honest discussion I have with them at the start is, do you know how mature your technology really is? How ready is the market for you? Can you talk to the market and ascertain that for yourself? Because I don't have the answer. You don't have the answer. You need the market to tell you. And based on that, are you ready to commit the next 3 to 5 years of your life to do this? Bear in mind, the VCs, they're also looking at the same answer. So if you want to sugarcoat it, you want to spin a lie like, the medtech, biotech startup, we all know about how she can test blood just with a pinch. I mean, by all means, it's really how good you are spinning a story. But if you're not going to do that, or if you're not ready to commit yourself to just $1,000 allowance per month, then it's not a journey for you. Because if you're not ready for that, the investors are not going to be ready for you. It's your decision at the end of the day. And as a mentor, it's my job to point that out. I'm not going to tell you, oh, the market is going to be ready in 3 years. Just don't worry, just get to it. It's not our job to say that for you. It's our job to say the otherwise, actually.
Thanks very much, Shawnee. Professor Chia.
So on I believe the question has to do with how do we help the deep tech entrepreneur pivot. And so on this issue, it's really, you're really asking a different question. You're really asking, well, this path isn't the right path for this particular technology. Shouldn't you change your mind, right? And so we use the word pivot for that, to change your mind. And we use that word, came from the lean startup with digital technology. So it's easier to change your mind, if you will, from that space. Whereas deep tech is a whole different animal. You can't just go and change your protein gene therapy overnight because there's a different market. So let me step back and say the following. There really are, I hope you don't take this as a lecture, because I will get to the point. There really are two ways for you to cope with a world of great uncertainty where you don't know the outcome. Two ways. One is, of course, agility, which is what you hear of with the lean startup and pivot and being agile and so forth. The second one, which is more applicable to the deep tech entrepreneurs, has to do with the ability to forecast. Okay, in other words, looking at mega trends, what's going to be important 3 years, 4 years down the road in terms of needs of the world, and then positioning your technology or your product so the world comes to you. All right. Both of them require you to talk to people, to be externally driven, to really talk to enough stakeholders to understand the current environment, if you need to be agile for the media, digital entrepreneur, or to really truly understand industry structures in terms of mega trends, and to position yourself. So back to the question, how do I help deep tech entrepreneurs pivot? I don't help them pivot, because as Xiao Ling has said, you don't tell people what to do, right? So instead you ask them about what was the base assumption when they went down this path of this technology in terms of market needs. And then ask them, and bring the question into mega trends. Do you see that what's the main issue? Is it food security? Is it environmental? Is it healthcare? And within that, how does your technology position to a greater need that is coming down the road 3 years, 5 years down the road? Because to be honest, when we're dealing with deep tech, we are talking about that kind of time frame for any kind of meaningful commercialization. So that's how I deal with the entrepreneurs when I mentor them.
Fantastic, thank you. Bernadette, if I may switch gears a little bit and talk about Entrepreneur First, because you guys do have a fairly large community of mentors or entrepreneurs and residents that are meant to support and mentor the founders. How do you go about matching mentors to mentees? Especially given the complexity of both technologies and individuals that you're dealing with, right? Because you are talking about human beings here, and there's a certain amount of complexity, I suspect, in matchmaking.
Yeah, absolutely, Eugene. And the short answer is we don't. So we have a great bench of venture partners, as well as 2 entrepreneurs in residence, as well as a few folks on the internal team like myself who'll work with the startups. But in the first phase of the program, which is called Form, you'll get to meet all of these people. So we don't actually allocate you somebody that you can only speak to Xiaoning, or you could only speak to, for example, Shu. What we do is we expose you to the breadth of advisors that we have. And I think one of the best things that I consistently hear from our cohort is you learn something different from them. And even better, sometimes they'll contradict one another. Sometimes someone will push on something and someone will say that's completely trivial. Why are you focusing time on that? And that's so important for people to get exposure to early on as a startup founder. There is no one golden thread of advice that's going to work for everyone. And often I'll get complaints to say, like, you know, your team is misaligned or your venture partners contradicted each other. And I always think that's such a great thing. And I'll always say, great, so you've had your first experience of what it might be like to run a board meeting. And so from that perspective, we don't allocate anybody in the first few weeks of the program. What we do is have our teams, having had exposure to all our venture partners, nominate who they felt most comfortable with and who they felt was most aligned with their business and the way they wanted to take it in the second phase of the program, which is where they do get ready for venture funding. And so from that point, we also ask our venture partners as well. So it has to be a double opt-in.
Fantastic, thank you. And to Xiaoning, I suppose one of the questions I wanted to ask you was the scalability of your mentorship model. You mentioned earlier a large number of startups that you deal with within your network. And as you start accumulating all of these companies, is there an ability to help scale? Is there an ability for you to scale in terms of your provision of mentorship to some companies?
So ideally, I don't scale on mentoring. I scale on angel investing because mentoring is really very hard. It's a very time-heavy commitment. And that's why the style that I adopt to work with the companies within my portfolio without outside the portfolio is always on WhatsApp. Let's chat about something. If something that is really bugging you, let's have a coffee over this. But nowadays it's over Zoom, right? The thing is, frankly speaking, what I realized for a lot of people is that you're trying to find answers. But the thing is, as a mentor, we are not standing in your shoes. No matter how well you elaborate the questions or the problems you face, we still can't see all facets of the problem. So you should talk to multiple people and get the different views, and then you apply your own lenses and make a decision and own that outcome. I think I can't stress enough that you have to own the outcome. You cannot find answer outside of yourself. And sometimes I actually deeply believe that the founders have the answers within them. They just need the next step to really make that call and to act on it, to execute it. And a lot of times we just want to hear the one more voice say that, yes, you're right. But the thing is, no one can tell you that because we don't know. No matter how well-meaning we may be, we don't know. Because there could be an aspect that is, inside your mind, something is very important, but you're not articulating it in the way that can help us understand. So we can never help you make a decision. Mentors are not here to make decisions. So personally, if it's a mentor helping you to make a decision, I will be very concerned, right? Because, like I say, we are not here to do that. It's the founder's job. It's your decision in life. And I can't scale mentorship. I can't scale mentoring because it's really quite time intensive. And to really understand a person, it takes a lot of time. So for me, with my own portfolio companies, it's really email updates, WhatsApp chats whenever there's an issue. And ideally, you give me 3 or 4 options. I was telling Bernadette, don't ask me how to solve a thing. Give me a few options you're thinking about, and then we discuss the options you have. Because I can't come up with solutions if you have no answers. Yeah, so I can't scale that. I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly what I think I wanted here. But you talk about the evolution, I suppose, now towards mentorship via Zoom or mentorship via WhatsApp. Maybe I switch gears a little bit and ask Professor Cha, who actually wrote the book on this. I think you did have a section in your 2013 book titled Asia Entrepreneurs, right? Or Asia's Entrepreneurs.
I'm surprised anybody even read that book or no less bought that book. I'm not here to plug that book. In fact, I'm here to tell you, don't buy that book.
But since you wrote that book and back in 2013, I just wanted to get a sense from you on how mentorship on a whole has evolved. I mean, especially as part of the ecosystem, where I think in 2013 we really had a very nascent deep tech ecosystem. I think we've evolved over time. We've had a burgeoning growth in terms of the number of angel investors, mentors that have come on board. How do you think it's changed really? And do you think that that has had a positive impact in terms of ecosystem development here in Singapore?
Well, I've been you can see I'm the only gray hair person in this group. So I've been around for a while. So I've watched this ecosystem grow. I was an entrepreneur myself 25 years ago in 1995. By the way, I don't know if everybody in this webinar, in this panel know that Singapore actually invented the word technopreneur. I bet you didn't know that. That word was invented right here in Singapore in 1995. So anyway, I've watched this ecosystem grow. And when I was an entrepreneur, there were no mentors around. We only had investors. And if you read my book, you would know that back then the investors were awful. And I'll tell you why. I don't mind. They know who they are. We didn't exactly have a really great relationship because all these investors back in the mid 90s in tech, they were all ex-bankers. And so bankers back then did not understand tech. Okay, they understand investing from a financial point of view, but technology has its own set of dynamics. So it was horrible in the mid 90s. There were no mentors. Investors didn't understand tech, so forth and so on. But we've come a long way since then. And we've reached actually a sweet spot, I would say a few years ago, where we had enough exits. I mean, Xiaoling is the great prime example of that. She was an entrepreneur and she became successful, had an exit. And for whatever crazy reason that overtook her, she decided to contribute as an angel investor, which is great. This is exactly how a vibrant ecosystem ought to be, which is those in the ecosystem earlier come back and bring their wisdom, bring their money, bring their time to nurture. So we've reached actually quite a sweet spot now, recently. Now, what I see, and I don't want to call it a danger, but I want everybody to be aware of this, okay? And that is, all of a sudden, it's now, entrepreneurship innovation is now a hot topic. I mean, back in the days when I was an entrepreneur and quit my job at a research institute, I don't know if anybody knows that part of my background. I actually was working at a research institute in the old days under what was called NSTB, now under a STAR. But I quit my job, convinced a whole bunch of researchers to quit their jobs and go into a startup and raise capital. Back in those days, people thought we were crazy. What are you, nuts? But so back then it was like unheard of. Today, it is almost fashionable to be talking about entrepreneurship, innovation, and so forth. So there is a slight danger now that is becoming faddish to be associated with the ecosystem. Now, coupled with that, we're starting to see a lot of quite successful executives from professional jobs, MNCs, IT companies have reached retirement age, my age, and they have a lot of time on their hands and they have a lot of wisdom to share, which is great. Then they want to join into this ecosystem. And I think it's great to have a lot of choices of mentors and people wanting to contribute, but they need to be cognizant that it's a different set of dynamics because they never went through this themselves. Okay. So if they're applying a big company mental model to give advice to young entrepreneurs, I'm not sure that's spot on. So the bottom line is we really reached a sweet spot a couple years ago with people like Xiaoling and people coming in. I can name other entrepreneurs who came back into contributor system. But now it's getting to a point where you have to be cognizant of a lot of players coming in. That's my observation.
Well, that's
Raising
fantastic.
My hand. Usually I'm raising my hand. Prof has given me a jumping board. I need to do my plugin for Angel Central. So I think we need to bring in smarter investors to support the ecosystem. And that's why it's really important. I think Virginia actually has said the right thing. Actually, I was just like maybe 5 years behind Virginia in my journey, and we didn't have mentors. And when I quit my job to start Job Central back then, my college friend from US called me and said, "You're crazy, you're throwing your career and to do something that is, nobody does it," right? But the thing is, I think it's a journey that it's a very rich journey. No pun intended, but it's a very rich journey for me on a learning process. And I think it's for anybody who wants to do that, I think it's a decision that I totally encourage, but you need to go in with your eyes open. I totally get, Prof, that it's a fetish now, and too many founders go in with the idea that it's just glamorous, it's just exciting, and they don't see the tears behind, they don't see the blood behind. And I think you really need to go in with the eyes open. That said, if you want to know about angel investing, you need to bite-size it. You need to have your discipline. And I think Virginia, when she said she did $250,000 investment for one angel investing, that was a very lesson that I learned, why I need to have a portfolio, why I need to bite-size. Because when you need to manage a company that you put in 400,000 in versus a company you invested just 50,000, your style, the way your heart muscle work is very different. So in order to protect yourself, to manage your diversification, please come join our master classes to understand a bit more. Even if you don't intend to invest, as long as you intend to work with startups, you need to come to work with us to do this. We actually do a lot of case studies and sharings so that we make sure. Actually, Bernadette just came to our class.
Charlotte, you can pay me later. You can pay me later.
Yes. I still owe you a big bouquet of flowers for your birthday last year.
Oh, no.
It's really, really important to support the ecosystem, but we got to do it with the eyes open, and we got to do it sensibly. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Xiaoning. And I think on a related note, so I've got a question here from Daniel Quack, and Professor Cha has talked about the proliferation of mentors, some of which may not be the most ideal for your company. And I suppose one of the questions that Daniel is asking is, what are some of the signs that perhaps you need to engage another mentor, that the one that you have right now is not working for you? Bernadette, you mentioned the possibility of engaging multiple individuals and soliciting different opinions, and that might actually be helpful. But could you share a little bit more on how you know if it's the wrong opinion you're getting, perhaps?
I think it's hard to say. I think there's a really fine line between the wrong opinion and the opinion you don't want to hear. And I think you need, as a founder, to have the humility in any role, actually, and including my role. Like, sometimes there are things that I don't want to hear as well, but they're the hard truths that need to be said and need to be, chewed upon. I think when you do know it's the wrong mentor is when you're actively curtailing the information you share with them. When you are maybe doing more to manage up or manage across, rather than saying, this is the real pain I'm struggling with in the business, and I trust you enough that I can just share this with you in an unfiltered way, and it's not going to lead to you telling people in the ecosystem about it, or it's not going to lead to you thinking about offering me a predatory term sheet because you know my runway is running out. But I think that's when you know that you might be in the wrong mentor relationship. But I would challenge people to say that there are times you are going to hear things from your mentors in a very well-intentioned way that are really difficult to hear. That doesn't mean they're the wrong mentor for you.
Amazing. Thank you, Bernadette. Xiaoning, Virginia, do you have anything you want to add to that as well? What does the wrong mentor look like?
I guess I'm not sure if there's a wrong mentor because everybody will have their different views. You're just having disagreements. So I think it's the entrepreneur has to be able to sift. I mean, that's the key to entrepreneurship, actually, is for you to make the right decision. And you're going to hear a lot of noise. Once you become an entrepreneur, trust me, everybody and his brother knows so much about your business, and they're going to tell you about it. And I know those of you who are entrepreneurs are nodding your head. I mean, trust me, you say you're doing a startup in, I don't know, AI healthcare. Next thing you know, your Auntie Rachel at the Chinese New Year party that's coming up is going to tell you all about what she thinks about that, okay? So you're going to hear so much from everybody. There's so much noise out there, and it's up to you to separate, to get the signal out of the noise. That's what you have to do.
Excellent advice.
So to echo both my dear ladies is that I think one lesson I've learned, one observations I've made when working with the new founders who just came out from the PhD program, one of them actually told me that, Xiaoning, from now on, you got to address me as Dr. So-and-so. I'm like, okay, please, let's make sure that we are here for a friendly relationship and nobody is more senior than the other person. So be very clear that mentors are not more senior than you, but neither should you position yourself on a pedestal, right? I think we are here because we want to help. And if you think that the advice is not something that is tenable for you, I mean, by all means, screen it out. But the thing is, if you're hearing the same thing said to you 3, 4, 5 times, I think there's enough data points, enough frequency for you to take note of that. So end of the day, it's your call what information you want to take on and what you want to act on. But I think the amount of humility, I think this is a keyword that I think I take away from Bernadette, that we need to remember and just be very clear about it. You need to act on it. No mentor can do anything for you if you don't want to act on the right decisions.
Right. So thank you very much, Xiaoning. So I'm going to pick up on that point because it's something that you've echoed throughout your comments today about how an individual founder needs to take ownership of their decision making, right? And so to tie it together with Peter's question on helping founders cope with setbacks, having taken responsibility for those actions, having made maybe erroneous decisions, and having come to a point where you realize that you've made you failed. Can mentors, or actually should mentors, be in a position to help coach individuals surface from these failures?
I definitely think so. Mentors are not mentors are not people for sunny days only, right? Right, and in different situations, I mean, but then again, you got to see what's your relationship like. I would say that to go back to the situation that Virginia was sharing just now, that when the founders start to sugarcoat and only give you the good stories, I think the founders, their starting point is really off. You're not seeing the mentor as a friend or as a person that you can really go to and talk openly about the issues that you have. It's a choice that you make. But I would say that actually, I did a session with Kylie from 500 Startup, I think two years back. I think even for some of the VCs, of course, the financial return is something that we're looking for. But then the thing is, we always see the founder as the person. It's not pure finance return. If your VC is like that, I mean, bad news, right? But the thing is, you need to find someone that you could link with. You can talk about issues, and sometimes, I mean, we have gray hair. We have a lot more gray hair. So I say that we're a couple of years more than you. So sometimes we can give a different perspective that you might have missed out. So please talk to us. Don't just give us the good news. When there's bad news, we can help too. And I see it as my job to tide through the situation with them. Sometimes there's nothing we can say, you know. Seriously, there was one time that I just sit there and hold the phone. I just want to make sure the person is there with me for because it was really a dark period. And I see it as my responsibility to hold to that. And then, you know, he just stay on the phone with me. It's okay that he doesn't say anything. I also didn't have nothing to say, right? But the thing is, I just want to make sure that he knows that we are there for him, because sometimes it's just very dark, and if you can't navigate yourself out, just stay with someone, right? And if it's a mentor who can help you, great. If it's your parents who can help you, great. Your parents are your first mentors in life, right?
Thank you, Xiaoning. And so on that sobering note, let's explore this final question with Bernadette and Virginia as well. Bernadette, mentors in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. What are your thoughts on this?
I'd echo what Xiaoning says. I would say that the best founders own their outcomes, though. And I think there's a difference between leaning on a mentor and seeking help and advice versus asking them to get you out of it. And I think it's important to draw that distinction in your own mind and also explicitly with your mentor to say, when things are difficult, absolutely reach out, ask for help, ask for advice and guidance. But I think it's also incumbent on the founders to own their outcomes and solve their way through it as well. I don't think you can overly rely on any mentor, investor, partner as a crutch there.
Thank you. And the last word, Professor.
I don't know. It's hard to always to do the last word with among such wonderful speakers. But okay, I do something slightly different because I'm not a people person, as you probably figured out. You know, so I can't do what Xiaoling does, which is hold the phone and sayan you in silence. I can't do that. That's not me. Okay, so you get in trouble, you come talk to me. We talk, and then what I usually do, and this is based on trust relationship as opposed to those entrepreneurs who only gave me good news. But for those who actually have a real trust relationship with me, and I did not angel invest in, I'm just a mentor, okay? And so what I actually do sometimes is when they get in a lot of trouble, or they're not able to sort of see their way out of it, I do something tangible to help them get past this phase so that they know that somebody believes in them and trust them to get out of this. So I usually, and this is not advertising anybody to come see me as a mentor, okay? Because I'm actually hard to find. But I actually write a check, and it's not very big. It's something like $30,000. It's not big. And it's interest-free, collateral-free, no paperwork loan. It's just verbal. Okay, and I've done it several times. And by the way, I have 100% payback rate, so I do better than banks. Okay, so, and it's an amazing thing when the entrepreneur is in the middle of a lot of uncertainty. They either screwed up or they made a wrong mistake or they're actually running low on cash, and their mentor writes them a check with no paperwork and just say, use this money to get you past to the next milestone. And I trust that you, and you don't even talk about payback schedule, none. It's not even discussed. And guess what? I've had 100% of all those loans paid off within a year, and they all do better, amazingly. And it's just that little thing, that little sign that says somebody believes in you. That somebody is not your mother or your uncle, okay? It's somebody who's in the ecosystem who sees something in you. And sometimes that's all you need. And so I do that, okay? Because and to me, it's easier for me to write that $30,000 check than to hold somebody's hand and listen to them. So hats off to you, Xiaoling, because I can't do what you do. So
that was actually one of the companies that I was supporting in one of my peer group. It was not a portfolio company, but I think the fact that he trusted in me to give me a ring to talk through the issues,
yeah,
I felt that it was my, I don't do that on a daily basis. I think my hair will be like, I would have no hair if I do that on a daily basis. But I think Virginia is totally too humble. She is actually the one that I run to whenever I have issues to talk about.
Anyway, the other thing I would like to add is that we also, this is my style, not everybody can adopt this style. I tend to be very direct because I lack completely social skills whatsoever. So when an entrepreneur says something, doing something that I believe to be utterly stupid, I will say so. Now, I won't tell them what to do instead. But I feel that it's my responsibility to whack them around a little bit and get their attention. Say, hey, this is stupid. What are you doing? And not many people would do that. It's my style. And as a consequence, I don't actually have that many entrepreneurs approaching me to be a mentor, which is a good filtering mechanism.
So we've got two companies in our portfolio we might need to send your way to get slapped around a little bit.
Anyway, Bernadette, you've already spoken.
But on that note, I think our time is up for this afternoon. Thank you so much for your wonderful contributions, Professor Cha, Ms. Bernadette Cho, and Ms. Wang Xiaoning. Thank you very much again. And I believe SGInnovate A-Star will come together again for another session in April to talk about deep tech. And we look forward to, well, seeing each and every one of you participants come by, join in. I apologize, I haven't been able to address all of the questions out there, but I think we are going to put some of our LinkedIn profiles. If there's a means by which we can address some of your questions offline, I think that's how we can do that as well. With that, I'll hand it back to SGInnovate. Zing, do you have anything you need to add to this?
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for the wonderful conversation that you had. Seems like our attendees are very happy to be able to interact with you guys, and they have so many questions. It's a pity that you weren't able to go through all, Eugene. Yeah. So yeah, do keep a lookout for the event recording through a post-event email coming to your inbox soon, and feel free to let us know by the survey that will pop out after you exit on how we can improve and what you'd like to see more of. Do also mark your calendars for April, as we will be having another Promise of Deep Tech event then. So without further ado, have a great Lunar New Year weekend, and we hope to see you again. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.